Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 519, and today is December 27th, 2023. This will be the second to last episode of 2023. Typically at the end of the year, we've done like year in review episodes. There's just so much news right now. I think we're going to continue putting out regular episodes. If anybody does have like a question they really want us to address looking back at 2023, shoot myself or Connor Freeman a message. Twitter be preferable. I am on Facebook. If we don't have any mutual friends on Facebook and you want to add me, just send me a message as well saying that, hey, I'm not a bot. So I will go ahead and add you, and you can send me a message there. Or I am on Instagram at Kyle Anzalone 3. Those are the best places to get a hold of us to ask a question. Also, we are holding our end of the year fundraiser at the Libertarian Institute, so we will be wrapping that up pretty soon. Help us to get to our goal. Head on over to the Institute and make a donation today. We are a tax deductible organization, and we put out, I think, some of the most important, some of the widest ranging, and also just, the amount of content that we put out at the Institute. A number of books every year. I'm writing news articles every day. I'm putting out a news roundup most days of the week, at least 3 episodes of Conflicts of Interest every week. And then on top of that, of course, it's not just me. It's, the great Scott Horton, the Scott Horton Show, all the work he's doing. His forthcoming book, Provoked, will be published by the Institute. We have the co-host of this show, Connor Freeman, who does a lot of writing for the Institute. Keith Knight, Jim Bovard, Lori Calhoun, Tom Woods, just so many great people at the Institute producing content all the time, just some of the most important stuff. So if you're a libertarian, you want to see, more libertarian stories so we could continue to be a part of the conversation, head on over to the Institute and make a donation. I really appreciate it when especially listeners of the show do that. All right, so a couple stories here today. First story I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on December 26th. Japan to send Patriot interceptors to the U.S., freeing up American supplies to send to Ukraine. So Japan will send Patriot air defense missiles to the U.S. The move will allow Washington to dive deeper into its own stockpiles for transfer supporting Ukraine's war effort. Tokyo is altering its arms export laws to send Patriots to Washington. On Friday, Japan had announced that it had loosened its arms export control laws. And so after World War II, Japan adopts what I think is better described as a non-interventionist constitution, but some people call it a pacifist constitution. So initially, after World War II, Japan's supposed to have a very scaled down military. That's, really not true today. They have access to a lot of America's top weaponry and everything like that. But as far as exporting weaponry or deploying Japanese forces abroad, there's a lot of restrictions within the Japanese constitution that the government does more or less usually abide by on that. And so Japan, in their laws prior to Christmas, said that, they could export certain components of arms, say, to the U.S., but they weren't supposed to export finished weapons to any country. And so they altered that move to allow at least, for close allies to receive whole weapons. And so with that, they are sending Patriot interceptors to the U.S. Tokyo said that would use the new authorities to provide the Patriot air defense missiles. There wasn't a lot of clarity on it, but my understanding is that Japan uses the PAC-2 and the PAC-3 Patriot interceptors, with the PAC-3 being the most advanced. In Japan, Patriot interceptors are produced by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries with licenses from Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. Raytheon, by the way, changed their name to RSS, I believe. So there's like they consumed another company and slightly altered their name, but Raytheon is what everybody knows it as, so I'm going to keep using that for now. The Patriots are considered some of Washington's most advanced air defense missiles. The Biden administration has sold Patriots to its European and Asian partners. Additionally, the U.S. has sent interceptors to Ukraine and deploy the systems to the Middle East. The White House's desire to expand the U.S. military around the globe has strained the Patriot supply. The Biden administration welcomed the Japanese decision. The transfer takes Tokyo further from its non-interventionist post-World War II constitution, and Japan made the decision to alter its constitution while at the same time adopting its largest ever military budget. Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago, I think just mayor of Chicago, not governor of Illinois, said, and he is now the U.S. ambassador to Japan, "I don't see another country that has adopted so many changes so significant to our defense and security. The scale, the scope, and the speed is unprecedented and really welcomed." And so, Japan is becoming more militaristic, and here the White House is, absolutely praising it and not saying that, hey, we want less militarism in the world. And then Emmanuel continued, "The Japanese missiles would give us flexibility for our inventories," the ambassador said, suggesting Washington could leverage the new Patriots to send American made Patriots to Ukraine. And so, with the Japanese rules, they're not going to allow their Patriot interceptors to be sent to the Ukraine, but they could be sent to the U.S. and then the U.S. could send ours to Ukraine. So, just some complications there. Now, one other thing that is kind of getting in the way of any transfer, I would assume, would be the lack of funds. And so I believe the White House said they have money for one more transfer. So maybe they've been waiting for this to happen so they could go ahead and put a bunch of Patriot missiles in that transfer or something like that. But without another approval from Congress, it's going to be hard to send Ukraine a significant amount of these Patriot missiles, as they are very expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars for each interceptor. And again, the White House just doesn't have the funds for that at this time, or, only has about, I think, $1 billion left in funds they could use. One more arms transfer before the end of the year, and then there won't be any more. All right, so let's move on here, talk about some news dealing with the war in Gaza. Netanyahu vows to expand operations in Gaza, says war isn't close to finished. The Israeli Prime Minister has vowed to expand military operations in Gaza and said the brutal assault on the besieged enclave is not close to being finished. Netanyahu said on Monday, "We are not stopping. We are continuing to fight, and we will intensify the fighting in the coming days, and the fighting will take long, and it is not close to concluding." The following day, the Israeli military said it was expanding its ground operations in the refugee camps in central Gaza after Israeli airstrikes pounded the area. The Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff said Tuesday that the Israeli operations in Gaza will continue for many months. The comments about increased operations comes amid the U.S. officials saying they want Israel to wrap up its operations in Gaza, which involves constant airstrikes, ground operations, and they want Israel to transition to more targeted attacks on Hamas leadership, but there is no indication that Israel is listening to the U.S. advice, and the Biden administration continues to provide unconditional military aid to Israel. Netanyahu made similar comments while visiting an IDF intelligence unit. He said, "We are continuing the war and we are intensifying the fighting in southern Gaza Strip and other places. We will fight to the end with the help of the most advanced technology." Gaza's health ministry said Tuesday that Israel's bombardment killed 241 Palestinians and wounded almost 400 in the past 24 hours. The Palestinian death toll is now close to 21,000, including over 8,000 children. Many more could end up dying from hunger, as recent report using data from the UN and other agencies operating inside Gaza found that over 500,000 Palestinians in the Strip are starving and facing famine-like conditions. So this is a little bit more insight into what the Israeli policy is here. Netanyahu says he's looking for countries to absorb Palestinians from Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister said at a meeting of his Likud party on Monday that he's working to bring about the expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza and looking for other countries willing to absorb them. This is what he said. "Our problem is that countries are ready to absorb them, and we are working on it." His comments are the latest sign that Israel's ultimate goal is to cleanse Gaza of its 2.3 million residents. Netanyahu said the world is already discussing possibilities of voluntary immigration, and points to the comments from former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, who is currently running for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Haley said last week that Palestinians in Gaza should migrate to pro-Hamas countries. And so, this is so disturbing because this is openly talking about ethnic cleansing, something that you would think that most ordinary people would be horrified of. You should be akin to talking about something like a murder or a rape or something like that, where if you're talking about carrying out ethnic cleansing, it's just absolutely disgusting, and everybody around you should be, turned off by this. The Israeli people should be out in the streets protesting against their government. The American people should be out in the streets, and some are, protesting against their government. Everybody should be demanding an end to this openly admitted ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza, but that's not the case. Netanyahu said the team must be set up to ensure that those who want to leave Gaza to a third country can do so. It needs to be settled. It has strategic importance for the day after the war. And so what Netanyahu is saying is that that Gazans who want to leave can leave, but they're creating the conditions on the ground in Gaza where the options are going to be starvation, death by the Israeli military, death by pandemic in Gaza, or you could leave Gaza, and so it's not a voluntary resettlement. It is essentially force marching the Palestinians out of Gaza at the barrel of a gun. And then the idea of calling it a voluntary resettlement is absolutely disgusting and absolutely unacceptable. Two members of the Israeli Knesset have actually wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that also called for this. So while Netanyahu and other Israeli officials have framed this as a voluntary resettlement, Israel's brutal campaign in Gaza is making much of the enclave uninhabitable. About 90% of Gazans are already internally displaced. So again, just absolutely horrific. And of course, this is all endorsed and backed by the Biden administration. Could not happen without it. Calling him Genocide Joe is 100% appropriate. U.S. has delivered over 10,000 tons of weapons to Israel since October 7th. 240 American cargo planes and 20 ships have delivered over 10,000 tons of military equipment to Israel since October 7th to support the massacre in Gaza. The U.S. support has been crucial in Israel's ability to keep up its relentless bombardment of Gaza. The Washington reported on December 9th that up to that date, Israel had dropped over 22,000 U.S. provided bombs on the Gaza Strip. The Pentagon has refused to disclose what type of weapons it's been sending to Israel, but media reports have revealed some of the details. The Wall Street Journal reported on December 1st that the U.S. has shipped 15,000 bombs and 57,000 artillery rounds. The bomb shipments included over 5,000 Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs, which Israel has been dropping on the densely populated areas of Gaza. According to analysis from the New York Times, during the first 6 weeks of the war, Israel routinely dropped 2,000-pound bombs on areas in South Gaza designated safe for civilians. The Israeli Defense Ministry has said the U.S. arms deliveries also include armored vehicles, personal protective equipment, medical supplies, ammunition, and more. And one kind of crazy thing about that, when we look at the personal protective equipment, and that might not sound like the biggest deal. However, aid agencies are asking to allow their staff, journalists in Gaza, to have access to this. And so far that has been denied. And so, the U.S. government is giving the Israeli military things to kill Gazans, but not really giving the aid workers in Gaza the supplies they need to try to save people. And look, especially that report from the New York Times about the bombs being dropped on safe areas of Gaza. And you think about the report that I think is from Israeli intelligence saying that one of the goals is to thin the population of Gaza, which so horrific to use that phrase. it seems like that was probably a part of that those 2,000-pound bombs were dropped in a population thinning move, which would be a crime of genocide. And the Biden administration actually sent Israel the bombs to do that as it was happening. I mean, there's really nothing more horrific than the Israeli-U.S. policy here. So the U.S.-backed onslaught in Gaza has killed nearly 21,000 Palestinians, including over 8,000 children. The number is considered a low estimate, as thousands of bodies are believed to be buried deep under the rubble. The U.S. officials claim they are concerned about the mass civilian casualty rate in Gaza, but the Biden administration continues to provide unconditional military aid for the slaughter. A report from Plus 972 magazine revealed that Israel is intentionally targeting civilian areas as a part of its war strategy. They call them power targets, things like banks, universities, schools. Those are the kinds of targets that Israel intentionally is seeking out to hit, not to avoid hitting. All right. Next up here, a couple stories on the war spreading throughout the Middle East. U.S. launches airstrikes against complete Hezbollah in Iraq, injuring civilians. So the Pentagon says it launched airstrikes in Iraq on Monday night, targeting 3 facilities used by Shia militants Khalif Hezbollah and its affiliates after a drone attack on a U.S. base wounded 3 American troops, leaving 1 in critical condition. The Iraqi government strongly condemned the U.S. airstrikes as unacceptable violation of Iraqi sovereignty and said 1 security serviceman was killed and 18 other people were injured, including civilians. Iraqi sources told Reuters that 1 Complete Hezbollah fighter was killed in this strike. Complete Hezbollah is a part of the Popular Mobilization Forces, a state-sponsored coalition of mostly Shia Iraqi militants that was formed in 2014 to fight ISIS. The Iraqi government also condemned the attacks on U.S. forces, but warned that once the U.S. to cooperate with it to find the perpetrators rather than launching unilateral strikes. The government said of the U.S. strikes, it is clearly hostile, unconstructive act that does not serve the interests of long-term common interest. Since mid-October, U.S. forces have come under attack over 100 times in Iraq and Syria due to President Biden's full-throated support for the Israeli onslaught in Gaza. An umbrella group of Iraqi Shia militants known as Islamic Resistance of Iraq has taken credit for most of the attacks, including one that wounded 3 U.S. troops on Monday, which targeted a base in Erbil. The U.S. has launched several rounds of airstrikes against the Shia militants in Iraq and Syria since October, but they have not deterred the groups from launching more attacks. One outlet reported that another attack targeted U.S. bases on Tuesday. And so, we've seen this in the past too, that pretty soon after U.S. airstrikes, there's almost always a response from these groups attacking the U.S. base, showing that, the U.S. attacks aren't working as deterrents whatsoever. All right, next up here. Israeli airstrike in Syria kills senior Iranian IRGC commander. A senior member of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, was killed by an Israeli airstrike in Damascus on Monday, according to Iranian state media, and Tehran is vowing it will respond. The IRGC commander was serving as a military advisor in Syria and was once a close confidant of IRGC force commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed by a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad in 2020. Israel acknowledged the commander was killed but did not officially take credit for the airstrike, maintaining its policy of ambiguity about its operations in Syria. For years now, Israel has been bombing Syria with impunity, but rarely acknowledges individual airstrikes. And I do wonder, with Russia increasing ties with Iran, if this is going to draw some kind of response from Russia, where Russia, I think, in order to maintain its relationship with Israel and not to escalate the war too much in the Middle East, has essentially allowed Israeli planes to bomb Syrian positions. That's, I think, how low Assad is on the totem pole for the Russian, security concerns, that for years and years they've allowed Israel to do this, even though they have, troops and air defense system set up in Syria. And so they haven't activated that. But as ties have increased between Iran and Russia, killing this senior commander may draw some kind of response, not just from Iran, but also from Russia, I wonder. So the Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi, vowed a response to the killing. Raisi said the IRGC commander was martyred while serving as an advisor for the resistance front, defending holy shrines in Syria, as well as safeguarding Islamic ideals, and vowed the Israeli regime will repay for this crime. Hezbollah also condemned the Israeli airstrike and said the commander was one of the best brothers who worked to support Islamic resistance in Lebanon for decades, and his honorable life. Before the October 7th Hamas attack in southern Israel, Israeli warplanes had bombed Syria 25 times in 2023, and the airstrikes have escalated significantly amid the onslaught in Gaza. Earlier this month, Israeli airstrikes killed 2 IRGC members outside of Damascus. The Israeli killing of the IRGC commander and Israel's overall bombing campaign in Syria risked starting a major regional war. Syria is just one of the many fronts that could escalate to a full-blown conflict as Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fire across the Israel-Lebanon border, and the Houthis are targeting Israeli-linked commercial ships in the Red Sea. So last story here, and this is about Yemen. U.S. says it shot down 12 Houthi drones, 5 missiles in Red Sea. U.S. Central Command, that's CENTCOM, said Tuesday that a U.S. warship and fighter jets shot down 12 drones and 5 missiles in the Red Sea that were fired by Yemen's Houthis as tensions continue to rise in the region due to Israel's assault on Gaza. CENTCOM said the missiles and drones were fired by the Houthis over a 10-hour period, which began at approximately 6:30 a.m. Sana'a time on December 26th. The commander said the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Laboon and F-18s from the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group were involved in the incident. It's unclear from CENTCOM's statement if the drones and missiles barrage were targeting what actually was the target. There is no damage to the ships in the area or reported injuries. For their part, the Houthis said they were targeting an Israeli port city on the Red Sea and a commercial vessel in the Red Sea, the MSC United. The Houthis, formerly known as Ansar Allah, have vowed to target any ships heading to or from Israel in the region and are not backing down in the face of a new 10-nation naval task force that has been launched by the U.S. Houthi officials have made clear that the only way for their attacks on commercial shipping to end is if the Israeli siege on Gaza is lifted and a durable ceasefire is reached. A senior member of the Houthis' political bureau said, even if America succeeds in mobilizing the entire world, our military operations will not stop. And there's a really good interview by Sky Horn interviewing Nasser Arabi, the great Yemeni journalist, on the situation in Yemen and kind of, what the people there are feeling and why these operations are happening. So I would definitely recommend heading over and listening to that as well. Anyways, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the show today. I know we're on, compared to recent shows, we're really on the short side today. But at one point I was really shooting for a half hour to 45 minute shows, but just all the war and confrontation going on around the world, all the American military intervention, really, it's not possible to cover what I want to cover in that amount of time. And, with the depth that I like covering it in on this show. And so the shows have been longer, and I imagine will continue at least until the Israeli military operations in Gaza start to slow down a little bit, or say the U.S. can't pass more aid to Ukraine, and the Biden administration, the White House, has to just admit that war is coming to an end. But for now, I do expect the shows to continue to be longer. And for all the support that we've gotten on this show throughout 2023, I really do appreciate it. Again, we'll be back with one more episode before the end of the year. And then next week, the first show may come out on Tuesday rather than Monday, but I would expect 3 episodes next week as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I really appreciate all the support you give and any contribution you can make to the Libertarian Institute.